G'day everyone and welcome to my video on calisthenics training styles. Today in this video we're going to cover the 4 key things you want to be thinking about for calisthenics training as opposed to general bodybuilding training, and then we're going to go through the 2 main models of training, one being grease to groove and 2 being block training / periodization. Before that, I'm just going to do a quick overview of where I've been out in my life. I know I haven't posted for 4 to 5 weeks now. Essentially, I needed a bit of a break. My personal life was getting a bit complex and needed to focus on personal things. Additionally, around 6 weeks ago, I injured my shoulder quite badly where I subluxed it and popped it out. And so whilst I've been working hard to recover and rehab that shoulder, I haven't been as enthusiastic about showing my trainings, but going forward, I'm going to change that. I also recognize that you guys get a lot out of my videos, so I'm going to try record a few videos now that are educational in their nature, and then when I feel like it, I'll post some training days, and then also I'll post some vlogs down in Carnegie when we have a really good sesh. So I would note though, in winter Carnegie isn't as popular and I don't go as often. I only have 3 days to train, and if it's raining it's going to be a terrible training session for me, and so I probably won't go and I probably won't vlog it. Anyway, introduction aside, let's get to why you're actually here, which is how to practice for calisthenic skills. And note, I use the term practice because I think it's really important to get this idea of training calisthenics out of your head, because you train for bodybuilding, you train for a sport where you're trying to improve your cardiovascular system or improve your muscle size. But I think practicing calisthenics is much more like practicing an instrument, and the factors that you are considering and what makes a good practice session or training session, as you want, is much more akin to learning something like piano or violin. Additionally, I think this wording is important because it goes away from bodybuilding centered types of training, which people associate with the word training. This idea of training to failure or working in different splits and just working the muscle mindlessly through the pain, which isn't something that you actually want when you're trying to get good at calisthenics. For calisthenics, you really want to be focusing on about correct activation and the quality of your output as you are practicing. Similarly, when you're doing piano, you want to make sure you're doing the scale as perfectly as possible. Obviously, we can talk about form and intensity trade-offs later, but you really want to be focusing on always getting the correct activation, because that's what's going to give you the good foundations for that skill in the future. So, what are the 4 key principles that I want to talk about? Firstly, is that when you're training calisthenics as opposed to bodybuilding, you are training your central nervous system. What that means is that you're increasing the strength and frequency of the nerve signals to your muscle and getting them to coordinate in a way that is more efficient, as opposed to bodybuilding, where really you're pushing that muscle, building up lactic acid, allowing the proteins to break down, and therefore you're going to recover in the future so that muscle gets bigger, etc. There are other mechanisms around hypertrophy which I won't go into today, but basically it's the distinction between focusing purely on the muscle versus focusing on your central nervous system, which is around your brain and how it connects to every one of your muscles. What this means though is that whereas in bodybuilding training you focus on shorter rest times, pushing to failure, etc., in calisthenics you actually want to take longer rests in between your sets. When I'm doing big combinations that are challenging my central nervous system, I'll take 5 to 8 minutes rest, because the recovery rate for your nervous system is much longer than the recovery rate of your muscles in order to bring, remove lactic acid or all the other chemicals that increase fatigue within that muscle. That'll come back faster, but your central nervous system wants to feel fresh when you do that set. In calisthenics training, you can benefit a lot from visualization. Now, elite piano players can practice the piano on the train. They can do it whenever they want, provided they're in the right state of mind, and they actually improve their pieces or whatever they're playing by visualizing it, them actually performing the movement. The idea of visualization has slowly been making its way into the calisthenics community, but there are very scientific studies that show that when you visualize yourself doing the movement from a first-person perspective as opposed to a third-person perspective, that your body actually practices the brain signals. And if you're trying to tell yourself to feel the sensations as you would in, say, let's say planche. That'll come more naturally when you train planche. The third principle that comes out of this is that in calisthenics, you don't always train to failure. Because when you train to failure, when you do your next set, your central nervous system won't be as fresh, the nervous signals won't be as strong. Additionally, you might not get good activation in that set. And so if you look at your training session as a whole, the overall quality of that session goes down. So usually when I train, at least for my first 5 main combinations, I like to have a bit of gas in the tank, knowing that like, okay, maybe at the end of this, I could hold planche for another 3 seconds, but I'm not going to, because I achieved what I wanted to get out of the set, whether that be improved repetitions, getting the activation in a very difficult position or through a very difficult transition. And that's what gives me the benefit and control and the endurance when I want to train that skill again in a couple of days. The fourth principle is the element of focus. And that's kind of what makes an ideal training or an ideal set, that you have to be locked in. You can't be distracted, because if you're entering a planche or front lever and your mind is thinking about dinner or that TikTok reel you saw earlier or 30 minutes ago, you're not going to be locked into the set. The brain signals aren't going to be as strong. If you're doing a press, you're going to throw up the balance and you're going to fall over. And it doesn't allow you to actually be locked in and to properly get what you want out of that training. And so for the practical recommendation, before you perform your set, take some time to visualize in your head what exactly it is you want to feel and the set that you want to perform. There is a trade-off here, right? So if you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to do 5 presses, when you're doing your set, you're not actually focusing on the movement. You're focusing on counting how many presses you're doing, and that throws your attention away. A better solution is to visualize in your head beforehand, you're doing 5 presses. And before you do that set, say to yourself, I trust myself. I'm just going to focus on the movement. I'm going to focus on pushing. I want to focus on the technique, which allows you to focus on the set itself. And know that your body will do its best. And if you don't do 5 presses, that's okay. But because you're actually more focused on the set, you're much more likely to do 6, 7 presses and not throw your balance in the process. And so being present in the set and being aware of your body as you're performing is a real game changer. So that's generally the 4 principles I wanted to discuss today. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions on these. I can definitely deep dive into every one of these principles at a later stage. But now what I want to talk about is the 2 methodologies for training that I think are probably the most popular in the calisthenics world and the most effective in the calisthenics world. The first idea is greasing the groove. Now, the general idea of greasing the groove is that you're training at 60% intensity and you evenly spread your attempts throughout the day, because every time you do that attempt, your central nervous system will be extremely fresh because you haven't fatigued by going too hard, and you get a lot of volume at a very good level of activation. That means your body normalizes that movement. Now, this exercise regime works best for movements where your likelihood of injury is very low. Now, for me, I get problems with my wrists and my thumbs all the time, so I don't try to grease the groove planche. But I've had extremely good results in front lever, doing front lever presses. Let's say if my max is 5, I would do 3 presses multiple times throughout the day and do that for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden my my 1 set max will become 8 repetitions. Additionally, there's a different level of grease the groove that works better if you're busy, because greasing the groove, obviously not everyone can train throughout their entire day, but you can also do a greasing the groove method where you do maybe 80% intensity only in the evenings. So I'll get home from work, for example, and I'll have 4 hours, 5 hours until I go to bed, and I can probably do 8 sets, each one with like a 30-minute rest in between, where I basically do intense attempts, but allows me to get volume and intensity into my training, and otherwise I wouldn't have it. But if you're someone who's a school student, if you're someone at university, if you're someone on holidays, I would highly recommend doing grease the groove. It's an easy way to get killer gains. The second method of training I want to talk about is block training. And this is essentially how a lot of people train planche. A lot of elite athletes do this, but they divide their training into 2 parts. The first part is combinations training, where they take 5 to 8 minutes rest in between various combinations of skills that challenge your central nervous system. So a combination for planche might be planche hold, push up, hold, press, down, L-sit to increase the endurance, and then back into a planche hold at quite high intensity. But as you can tell, you're putting your body through various transitions where it has to relearn and capture the planche. That is very taxing for the central nervous system. And so you take 5 to 8 minutes rest, and you do various combinations that excite you on the day, things that you know that are challenging, but you can achieve them, and you have a lot of fun performing those combinations. Then what you want to do is take 10 minutes rest, because by then your central nervous system is quite fatigued, so you take even a longer rest, and then you do more volume work and more technical work. This will be at a lower intensity, mind you, but this is really where you want to be saving your energy between the sets, because you want to be sure that you're fresh for the next session. And you focus on your technique. So you have bands, you might be working on your PPT, you might be working on your trajectory, which is basically the angle that you go down and the way you approach your push-up, for example. So your trajectory of push-ups, and then you do that. And essentially, this is probably a more traditional training, but it's good they're also both fine to do in combination. I'm not going to talk about periodization today. That's a whole video in itself. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't think it's necessary to progress in calisthenics, but it is one effective way to progress in calisthenics, so I'm not going to critique it in that sense. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer them in follow-up videos. I might not be able to be great at responding at comments at the moment with the timeline that I work on. But yeah, I hope you guys got something out of this, and I'll chat to you guys hopefully next week. Have a good one.